Access to Democracy is made possible by donations from the following organizations. Thomson Reuters, a global company with expertise and insight to unravel complex situations in the areas of law, tax, compliance, government, and media. Their worldwide network of journalists and editors keep customers up to speed on relevant global events. Thomson Reuters, The Answer Company. Crutchfield Dermatology, a full-service treatment center and Medi-Spa in Eagan. Their goal is to help you look good and feel great with beautiful skin. The Minnesota Twins are looking forward to another great season in 2023, led by the return of All-Stars Carlos Correa and Brian Buxton. With the return of numerous players who were injured in 2022 and some new acquisitions, another division crown and a return to the World Series are in their sights. Established in 2007, 45th Parallel Spirits was among the first 50 micro-distilleries in the United States. Based in New Richmond, Wisconsin, all aspects of production occur at our facility. If you're interested in visiting and learning more about the 45th Parallel Distillery, please check our website and plan a visit to tour our facility and taste our spirits. Truestone Financial, with locations in Minnesota and Wisconsin, has proudly served its members since 1939. Truestone engages, educates, and supports its members to ensure they have the tools to empower their financial well-being. Truestone Financial, your neighborhood credit union. Learn more at truestone.org.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Access to Democracy. I'm your host, Steve Francisco. It's my pleasure to welcome back to Access to Democracy a return visitor to our studio, Jaylani Hussein, who is the Executive Director of the Council on American Islamic Relations for Minnesota, CAIR Minnesota. Did I get that right, Jaylani?
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
So for our viewers who may not know you, who may not have seen your previous appearance about a year or so ago, tell us just a little bit about yourself, where you came from, how long you've been in Minnesota.
So I've actually, I'm part of that early wave of East African immigrants. I came here in 1993, originally from Somalia. You know, my family always jokes that we were the first ones, earlier ones, and kind of told the story of how good Minnesota is, and the rest of the Somali community came. That's not true. It's just a joke that we have. But no, we came here in 1993. I was raised in South Minneapolis and Columbia Heights as well, and now it's been over 30 years, and I'm as Minnesotan as they get. I did not get out to. I'm a deer hunter, but I didn't get out there the last couple of years. But I'm now the Executive Director of CAIR Minnesota, and I've been that since 2015. And I definitely enjoy it. It's very difficult, but it's also a rewarding job.
Tell our viewers, if you would, for a moment, what is CAIR? What is its mission? And national organization, how many states are you active in?
So we have about 35 chapters across the country. We are kind of similar to what you would see in the ACLU and the NAACP, and so it's kind of a mix of that. We are a civil rights organization. We really focus on empowering the American Muslim community, but we also work intersectionally with other communities as well here in Minnesota. Our real mission is really to empower the American Muslim community, but also making sure that we build mutual understandings among different groups and bringing people together in coalitions to advance justice and peace in America. And so we work very closely with different organizations in the civil rights movement and social justice movement. We work on issues like education justice, focusing on reducing the achievement gap. We focus on issues like housing. We focus on issues that have impact on law enforcement abuses, including both state and city, but also federal, like the FBI and others. So we do an array of things. We also focus on educating the American Muslim community about their rights. And other communities. Well, we also focus on educating companies and organizations on how to work effectively with Muslims in workspace, in schools, and other places. So we do a variety of different things. In fact, our mission statement has this focus of education as a core piece of what the work that we do.
Which seems to be common with a lot of civil rights organizations in our country, that a lot of times you confront issues or problems in discrimination in the workplace or elsewhere, that are really based on ignorance, things
Absolutely.
that happen and conduct that people engage in that's really
Absolutely.
based on ignorance and not knowing other people from different
Absolutely,
groups.
and that's one thing we encourage. So if you're someone out there who you have a company or organization, we actually do diversity inclusion based presentations. So these are presentations that have been built over many years, and we've actually received national awards for this presentation, and it helps. And a lot of times people don't realize the more information you know, the less problems you have, the more you're welcoming, the more your business bottom line goes up, the more your work employee morale goes up. Everybody wins in these situations, and we see discrimination, misunderstanding, ignorance kind of recede. And it's something that we have to keep working on, and I think we've been very successful. We have trained so many companies in Minnesota and organizations, and we continue to do that. I think before the pandemic, we were averaging about 7,000 people that we were training annually just in Minnesota. And so even just a few weeks ago, I trained, I think, a couple hundred teachers across America, actually, and many others as well, and we do that all the time.
Right. And a lot of people, they still may not realize or understand that Minnesota is actually home to a very diverse Muslim population.
Absolutely.
People from different parts of the Muslim world. For a state that's relatively mid-size or on the smaller end of population, roughly about 6 million people, we have a significant East African population in our Somali community, but we also have a Palestinian community in Minnesota and people from other parts of the Middle East, right?
Absolutely. Minnesota is very unique, actually. We have a very well-documented history of what I would consider the early Arabs that came to the United States. So historically, we don't have a lot of traces of that, but we do in this area. So we have one of the oldest mosques in Iowa, Cedar Rapids, Iowa, called the Mother Mosque. And then we have another mosque in Ross, North Dakota. And we, according to the Minnesota Historical Society, we believe that those communities also flowed through Minnesota. And they were predominantly Lebanese or Syrian. So a lot of people forget Abdullah chocolates. And there are so many names that we sometimes don't even think about that are actually stories and names of these early Arabs that settled here in the Midwest.
So we are meeting together in this studio today, a little over a month after the horrific attacks of October 7th, when Hamas launched attacks into Israel. News reports say 1,200 Israelis killed, over 9,000 Palestinians, including several thousand children, have been killed, injured, maimed. Just a horrific state of affairs happening right now in Israel, but also in Gaza, also in the West Bank, also in the northern part of Israel, with rocket attacks coming over from Hezbollah in Lebanon. So I guess what I'd like to ask you, first of all, is how is this war impacting our local Muslim community in Minnesota? What is their reaction to these terrible events that we're seeing unfolding right before our eyes?
Thank you for asking that. So first of all, conflicts like this are significant for everyone involved, the Jewish community, the Muslim community. But for the Muslim community, I think it has been a very unique impact. We have seen now in Minnesota alone, I unfortunately stopped counting now, I think 5 or 6 families that have lost each more than 5 direct relatives, brothers and sisters. One of the worst stories is this family and the wife Manal. She lost 40 members of her family, her entire family.
In Gaza?
In Gaza. And they were actually the most well-known and most practiced optometrist in Gaza. They did all the eye exams and they did all of the surgeries. They were actually the family known for doing optometry. And they all, you have to understand, families in Gaza, because of the size and the fact that everybody has to live together, they all live in the same apartment. So as a new family grows, they usually add another floor to help expand the family. So this entire family of generation of brothers and sisters and their kids and their grandkids are all living in one large apartment. And when this missile struck, that entire family is wiped out. The only thing was left was the mother, which is the mother to Manal, and a nephew. 2 people survived. And so we've had now many of these families in Minnesota who are not just grieving about the war, but they've actually lost direct relatives And then, in addition to that, we have seen the rise of anti-Semitism, and we've seen the rise of Islamophobia. In Minnesota alone, we've had an assault of a woman that initially started off as a dispute over which person showed up first to the gas station. It eventually turned into an actual fight and turned into an actual assault with some sort of a sharp object. We've had one of our mosques, garages burnt. We've had now reports of many things happening in our public schools. We've had even threats online. We've received threats online. Our office was damaged. We still don't know the state of that case. So I would say there are layers of things that are happening to the Muslim community, and it's compounding. And the longer this war goes, we're really concerned about the impact that it has here in Minnesota.
About 2 weeks ago, you were part of a press conference in front of the Diana Murphy Federal Building in downtown Minneapolis, which made the local and national news, in which you called for a ceasefire. Some of the people who were there with you, many of them were Muslim, but there was also a small contingent of Jewish people who joined you at that protest as well, and other people of different faiths or perhaps no faith too. Calling on the Biden administration to support Israel implementing a ceasefire. I guess my question to you would be, is that a realistic thing to do when every day since October 7th we have continued to see rocket attacks launched by Hamas from Gaza into Israel? And obviously the depth and destruction that we see happening as a result of Israeli forces going after Hamas, in which innocent civilians are caught up and are being injured and killed. How do you separate the two so that you can get to a place where a ceasefire would actually be meaningful?
So first of all, I think we have to be very clear about what our religion and all of our traditions teach, including Islam, Muslim, and Judaism. And our religions teach the concept of the sanctity of life. One life in Islam, we believe, as the Quran teaches us, that saving one life is as saving mankind, and taking a life is as if you have taken mankind. And if you really think about this verse, it means the descendants of that human being that his life was cut short. We have to be on the side of life. And right now what is happening is the death toll is over 13,000, 12,000 or more that have been died. Over 8,000 are women and children, with 4,000 over them being children. What we're seeing right now is something I think we have not seen. And I think this is where maybe many people in America just have not heard the factual. The 2.2 million people in Gaza cannot escape the war. This idea of going to the south, the Israelis are still bombing the south. They're still bombing UN hospitals. They're bombing UN schools. People are dying in thousands of people per day. And I think for many of us in Minnesota, and we just think somehow maybe this is something that those who are more sympathetic to the Palestinians are saying this. No, 200 of the world's countries have demanded a ceasefire. And the main reason is the Israeli government said, we're not going to provide you water. We're not going to provide you food. We're not going to provide you electricity. No more medication. This is a siege beyond reasonably acceptable. If human beings who are in the middle of a war can escape the war, go somewhere where they don't have to be caught up in this conflict, I think the ceasefire concept would make some of an argument. But the reason why the UN is calling for it, 200 world countries are coming to it. Many of them are friends in the United States, many of them not. I believe that we are sadly in the United States supporting an overreaction by the Israeli government that I think will stain all of us Americans in ways we never thought. And that's why all the polls right now indicate that most Americans, Republicans and Democrats, the people of all the white, would support a ceasefire. Now, a ceasefire means we focus on saving life, because right now they're not allowing them to cross to Egypt. They're not allowing them to go anywhere else. There's no pathway to the sea. These people are locked. There is nowhere to go, and the Israeli government is not choosing to stop the bombardment. And right now we're seeing the casualties increase in a number that is unacceptable.
You mentioned attacks on a hospital. There was some news reporting a couple of weeks ago, I believe it was. This was a hospital, I forgot the name of it, but was located in southern Gaza, where Israel was telling people in northern Gaza to go to the south.
Right.
There was
there was also a UN camp that was in the south that people were going to.
But there was a rocket, I'm thinking of this particular incident, which I'm sure you're aware of, a rocket that was fired that impacted a hospital and killed a significant number of Gaza residents at that hospital. Hamas was quick to say this was Israel's doing. It was an Israeli rocket. Further investigation suggests it was not an Israeli rocket, that it was actually a misfired rocket from Hamas in Gaza again. So again,
I think the facts of these incidents can be disputed one way or the other. I think for many of us Americans who care that our nation does not bring us into a large-scale war. We've seen what we have done in Iraq. We've seen it in Afghanistan. We don't want to send any of our U.S. soldiers into another conflict because a nation decided to project a certain type of violence against the Palestinian people. What is happening now with that information, both sides are lying. People are lying in the middle of this war. And as for those who are in the middle, our job is to make sure we can bring peace and we can stop the killing and shedding of lives. I don't think most Americans wake up every morning hoping that more Palestinian children die. Right? And I don't think that makes Israel safe, and it does not make Muslims safe. It does not make Hamas less, because now you're giving more ammunition to people who were innocent, who are dying, who may now be more sympathetic to Hamas. Irregardless, I think for us who are not necessarily the two groups in the middle of this war, we have to side on the side of peace. We have to side on the side of protection. We cannot be used as a way to support violence.
Your statement at the press conference at the federal building, I was interested to see that you also made it very plain that you felt there were many Muslims here in Minnesota who had previously perhaps voted for President Biden who would not do so in the next election in November of 2024 because of his policies toward Israel and the Palestinians in Gaza. But at the same time, it's an interesting thing, because if right now it's looking like the probable Republican nominee is Donald Trump. We have a long way to go until that becomes a reality. It may not become a reality based on his legal predicament. But this is a former president who, after 9/11, claimed to have video evidence that Muslims were cheering in the streets of New Jersey and New York as the Twin Towers fell. And there was an extensive investigation of that, and there was nothing to corroborate what President Trump had said. So are you at all concerned that if the attitude is that Biden's policies are totally unacceptable and people shouldn't vote for him, are you concerned about what the outcome of that could be? And also the issue, I think, comes up with respect to the administration's initiatives to negotiate a cessation or a pause. I see some people are being criticized for that, calling for a pause in the fighting. Is this a distinction without a difference, this issue of a ceasefire versus a pause in your mind?
So first, I think, let me make a disclaimer. So at that press conference, because my organization is a 501c3 organization, actually I was not speaking as the executive director of CAIR. I was speaking as a community leader, which I am outside of CAIR. So we cannot say to our community as CAIR, vote for this or do not vote for that. But as an individual, for the Muslim community in America, majority have voted for Democrats. I'm speaking as a community leader now. We voted for Biden. We're the ones we feel have supported him, especially in swing states across the country, overwhelmingly. We believe that calling for a ceasefire, even if Israel rejects, but the fact that the president is refusing to call for a ceasefire, the Muslim community believes that he has chosen, he's making a decision that puts American Muslims at danger, puts more Palestinian life in danger. Because of the relationship between the United States and Israel, he is one of the most powerful voices that can make that happen, and he has refused to do that. As far as your second question, which is very important, what's the difference between a pause and a ceasefire? I think the conditions on the ground make that difference. If right now, majority of the people in Gaza could just find a place that they could go and sleep and do not have to worry about a bomb landing, because then the Israeli government will say, well, we thought there was a guy there. We thought there was one guy, but we took out 700 people, or we took out 500 people in a refugee camp. That's not an acceptable killing. That is a war crime. That is genocide. And so I think the challenge right now is Gaza is not like other wars where people could escape the space of conflict. Human beings in the middle of war are usually given a way out. You usually marchers, you saw those people now who walked from the north for the first time when there was some sort of a pause. But after the pause, the bombing continued, and the bombings are happening in the south part where the government is saying go to. So I think,
Jaylani, when you, I mean, this is really important.
Right.
When you talk about the term war crime,
right.
Did Hamas commit a war crime on October 7th?
Anyone who commits innocent people, who takes the life of innocent people, is guilty of war crime. No one is above the law. No one is accepted that. And I think a government that has even a more checks and balances should even be held with even a higher standard than a group of people doing things like what Hamas is doing. Because a government has to be treated in a way where they should show more restraint. Right now, what we are seeing is not a restraint from the Israeli government.
But a group like Hamas doesn't get a pass for
They would not
murder.
get a pass. Absolutely not.
I mean, we're seeing videos of the most horrific attacks that occurred against innocent people. The term you used earlier, innocent people, and that's wrong too. You condemn that as well.
We are the only community that's asked to condemn, and we've always condemned the killing of innocent people by anyone, regardless of who the victim is and regardless of who the aggressor is. We are on the side of life. We are on the side of people, keeping people peacefully. And I think for Americans who are watching this and Minnesotans who are watching me today, I call upon the greatest value of protecting life. People can get into a conflict. The reasons of the conflict can happen. But there has to be people on the sidelines who can come and say, we want peace.
And as I think most people understand, the roots of this conflict, the reasons that motivated people to do what they did on October 7th reach back much farther than October 7th.
Yes, it's failures beyond failures.
But the question is always, how do we get to a better place? How do we get to a place where we see the humanity in each other?
And that's why what we're asking for is just to stop the killing. The ceasefire is please save the innocent people. Doctors, journalists, civilians are being killed in the thousands. The weapons that are being used today in Gaza are weapons designed in the United States, supported by the United States. We have a moral obligation, unlike any other country. If you're in Uzbekistan or let's say Germany, it's not the same as the role that the United States
Let me
plays.
ask you, because I know you have relationships with our Minnesota congressional delegation. We talked about President Biden already. What are you hearing from members of the Minnesota congressional delegation, other than Congresswoman Omar, Ilhan Omar of the 5th District, who has come out for a ceasefire? What are you hearing from Senator Klobuchar, Senator Smith, and our other representatives?
Well, personally, I'm disappointed. I'm really disappointed because I believe that irregardless of who the victims are today, we should always have the same principle. And that principle is we are a nation for good, all good. We are a nation that can step into any conflict and be the best and model the best. I'm disappointed with our elected officials because they have chosen to allow the Israeli government to disproportionately attack the Gaza city and do that. I will add by this. I'm proud of the work that Betty McCollum has done. I think someone needs to give credit to her. Betty McCollum, and this is how sad this situation is. Betty McCollum could not pass a bill in the House of Congress. When the Democrats controlled the House, the Senate, and the President, she could not even pass a bill that literally said this: please do not use U.S. aid to torture children. We all agree with the idea of torturing children is wrong. She cannot even get the Israeli government and in the United States to allow a bill that says what we all would agree with. No one would come and disagree, but still she cannot pass that bill. That is the reality of this conflict. And if we cannot pass a bill like that, I'm really concerned about what type of signaling we send to the rest of the world.
Jaylani, I want to ask you about a statement made by the director of the FBI, Christopher Wray, testified before Congress this week, warning that the FBI is seeing increasing threats of terrorism, both directed at Americans here at home and worldwide, and domestically seeing threats of terrorism directed toward the Muslim community and toward the Jewish community. And we're seeing attacks on university campuses that directed at both groups too.
Right.
How have we gotten to this place? How do we get out of it? And I know we're down to 2 minutes. These go too fast.
I'll say very straightforward. Number one, ceasefire. We need the conflict over there to stop. We need to allow the humanitarian to flow. We need to protect the children and the civilians.
But a ceasefire by all parties,
yes,
including
ceasefire
Hamas.
by all. Absolutely. Ceasefire means stop killing, stop shooting, stop it. And I think we need to allow for people to be safe. The second piece, I think, which is to your point, is it is affecting us here. We have seen the increase of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, and we condemn both. And we need to wake up and realize that we need to check in with our both Muslim families, because Muslim students are feeling unsafe, Jewish students are feeling unsafe, Muslim families are feeling unsafe, Jewish families are feeling unsafe.
And this is America, where you're supposed to be
We
safe.
are seeing a return of a very aggressive anti-Muslim and anti-Semitic campaigns that are, I'm seeing that on my own Twitter space, the way that people are talking to us, it's crazy. And we are now seeing in Minnesota the attack on individuals, the attack on our place of worship, and we need to do something about that.
Absolutely. Well, let us hope that we reach a point, and soon, where we can, as I said earlier, where we can begin to appreciate the humanity in each other again, and get away from this hateful divisiveness and begin a dialogue.
Right.
You know, there are going to be honest differences that people have about policy, about foreign policy, about U.S. policy toward the Palestinians. Last question, 30 seconds. Is a two-state solution even still possible, do you think?
To be honest with you, right now, the only thing on my mind is to stop this war. Because I think that the other conversations
Thinking too far ahead, perhaps.
But I will just say is the most important thing I'll leave with everybody is, are we the nation that calls, are we the people who want peacekeeping? Do we want to be true to that? And if we are, why are we silent about who we all are?
Jaylani Hussein, Executive Director of CAIR Minnesota, thank you for being our guest on Access to Democracy.
Thank you so much.